When you think of generation-defining video games on the Nintendo 64, there are a few titles that might come to mind, such as The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, GoldenEye, and Super Mario 64. Another game that might come to mind is none other than Banjo-Kazooie. Rare's hit 1998 adventure game starring everyone's favourite bear and bird was not only a success in the late 90s, but its magic formula still holds well to this day, and is an easy game not only to come back to, but if you have never picked it up before, you'll find your feet quickly and commit yourself to the epic adventure that lies ahead. However, this video is not really going to be about Banjo-Kazooie, but rather its sequel, Banjo-Tooie. You see, Banjo-Tooie when released was still a huge success, but it doesn't appear to have aged as well as its predecessor. When people mention the big N64 classics, Banjo-Tooie gets somewhat overlooked. But why is that? In this video, I'm going to introduce you to the world of Banjo-Kazooie and try to understand why the first game hits the nostalgia feel better than the sequel. Why am I doing this? Because I genuinely believe that Banjo-Tooie is the ultimate video game sequel, and in the same way many video games we play now have borrowed ingredients from classic N64 titles, I think Banjo-Tooie is the hallmark for how a sequel should be executed. I can hear some people screaming at the video already going, "No Lancy, Banjo-Kazooie is easily the better game." And look, I won't deny that Banjo-Tooie does have some problems, but I really do believe that the magical equation as for how to properly execute a sequel lies in this 2000 classic. Despite releasing 24 years ago, many of the ideas and the manner in which those ideas are conveyed through great writing and gameplay design are perhaps more relevant than ever. So sit back, relax, and hopefully you'll find a newfound appreciation for this beloved game. Firstly, we have to talk about Banjo-Kazooie. For those who don't know, Banjo-Kazooie is a single-player, third-person adventure game in which the player takes control of a bear and a bird, Banjo and Kazooie. At the beginning of the game, Banjo's sister Tootie is captured by an evil witch, Gruntilda, who is often referred to as Grunty. Grunty unfortunately realizes she's not the prettiest face in the land, so she has a cunning plan to transform her body with the unwilling help of Tootie. It is up to Banjo and Kazooie to stop this transformation, rescue Tootie, and defeat Grunty. The game takes place in Spiral Mountain, where you learn some basic moves from bottles before entering Grunty's lair. Grunty's lair acts as a hub world to 9 diverse worlds, each with their own theme, biome, enemies, and objectives. In these worlds, players will need to obtain a variety of collectibles to help ascend the tower and reach Grunty. Each world contains 100 notes, which are used to open the doors in Grunty's lair, and each world also contains 10 jiggies, which are used to fill out puzzle boards that open doors into other worlds. Notes are simply littered across the world, whilst jiggies are more complicated to obtain. A jiggy may be hidden and require exploring to find. The player may need to solve a variety of puzzles, rescue 5 Gingers which are hidden in each world, or even complete a boss fight or minigame. So essentially, finding notes and jiggies found in each of the 9 worlds will help progress the game forward and help the player ascend the tower in Grunty's lair. Banjo and Kazooie are not alone, however, in their adventure. They can find bottles who will help teach them new moves, which can be useful in traversing, problem solving, or fighting. They can also find a mysterious shaman called Mumbo Jumbo, who in return for Mumbo tokens can help transform the bear and bird into other forms such as a bee or a walrus, to name a few, in order to help complete more aspects of each world. As well as some really strong writing with funny and interesting characters, Banjo-Kazooie never at any point felt dull or repetitive because of 2 key features. Firstly, the game always kept drip feeding you more moves throughout the game, allowing you to interact with the world in new ways, which always kept the gameplay fresh. For example, in the second world, Treasure Trove Cove, you learn 2 new moves which grant you the ability to use the flying pads and shock spring jump pads. Shock spring jump pads allow the player to launch high into the air with a powerful jump, which helps you reach places you previously couldn't, whilst the flying pad gives you the ability to fly around the map. What's vital, however, is that the world itself complements these 2 moves really well. The world is extremely wide and open, with not really many interior areas or small rooms compared to, say, the 7th world Mad Monster Mansion. Treasure Trove Cove also provides plenty of opportunities to reward the player for using these new moves, which means that the more the player interacts with the world, the better they can understand how to use these moves in more challenging circumstances in later worlds. For example, we see the spring jump pad being used in some later platforming sections in the 4th world Bubble Gloop Swamp. If you haven't worked it out yet, this game is all about collectibles, and Rare went above and beyond to make sure each collectible item not only serves a distinct purpose, but also has a unique personality. It sounds weird to personify these items, but this is executed really well. The first time you collect an item, it has dialogue with its own voice and tones, excitedly telling you what its purpose is for in-game. From then on, every chime and every item helps exemplify its identity. The rising woodwind of the red feathers, which are required if you're using flying pads, or the sweet buzzing melody of the extra honeycomb pieces, which when enough are collected can permanently increase your health. And who can forget the excited Ginger shout? Or the jiggy dance celebration. When 85% of your game is a collectathon, you have to ensure the player is not bored of picking up all these items. The player needs to feel motivated and have a sense of purpose to justify spending all the time grabbing these items, and Banjo-Kazooie never falls into that trap of, oh, I can't be bothered climbing here to get that thing. That drive is always there, and even in the more complicated worlds such as Click Clockwood, where collectibles such as notes are really spread far apart, you still feel motivated to continue exploring. On that note, let's talk about the worlds. Not including Spiral Mountain, which is the tutorial area of the game, and Grunty's Lair as the hub world, there are a total of 9 worlds, all of which have their own theme. Whether it's the Winter Wonderland of Freezeezy Peak, or the sewers of Clanker's Cavern, each world offers unique experiences with a variety of boss battles, mini-games, and diverse exploration. Ascending to the top of the tree in Click Clockwood in each of the 4 seasons, or exploring the different chambers and tombs in Gobi's Valley. The community still to this day loves doing tier lists to rank all the worlds and debate which ones are their favourites. Yes, there are some worlds that are not as fun as others. For example, Rusty Bucket Bay can be a bit of a chore with so many small and tight separate areas, combined with the toxic water and the dreaded platforming section in the engine room. There is always a frustrating way to die right around the corner, and the player is always at risk of having to begin collecting the 100 notes in the world from scratch if they do perish. But those things that make Rusty Bucket Bay a challenge is what gives it that unique identity, and while exploring the ship can be a chore, there is still plenty of character within this world. By the way, the soundtrack in these worlds are both iconic and timeless. These worlds hold up so strong even by today's standards. The game itself even knows this, as just before the final Grunty boss fight, the player has to complete a quiz show called Grunty's Furnace Fun. Some of the questions might be identifying which world a picture is from, general knowledge questions regarding the game, or even completing a mini-game from the previous worlds. The fact that I was able to recall even as a child some of the finer details of the worlds in the game just goes to show how well crafted these playable spaces are. This all culminating in a boss fight which requires you to use a variety of moves and strategies that you have learned over the previous 9 worlds, but this time in a heavy combat focused scenario. It really is the icing on the cake and a great way to conclude the game. But then 2 years later, Banjo-Tooie released and doubled down on Rare's magic formula. Banjo-Tooie was ambitious and really pushed the limits of not just what the N64 was capable of, but it forced the player to flip the script and have a completely different perspective on how to interact with tougher puzzles, more challenging boss fights, and more complex worlds. As I said at the start of the video, Banjo-Tooie isn't looked back upon by the modern player as fondly as Banjo-Kazooie. Generally, when people want to replay a classic Rare adventure game, Banjo-Kazooie is more than sufficient to satisfy that nostalgia hunger. Well, let's dive into some of the big changes in the sequel. First and foremost, Rare always planned to make a sequel, and that is really important to know going forward. Banjo-Tooie wasn't a cash grab for the sake of a sequel, and Banjo-Kazooie doesn't come across as a half-baked game with features cut out for the sake of reselling later, which unfortunately in the modern day is becoming more and more prominent. Banjo-Kazooie is a full, complete game that can stand on its own, whilst Banjo-Tooie acts as a massive DLC almost, which is 2 to 3 times longer than its predecessor. At no point in these two games do you feel shortchanged. We know it was a planned sequel because not only is it mentioned explicitly at the end of Banjo-Kazooie, but because of the mysterious stop and swap items. If you don't know, stop and swap was a planned feature where you could collect items from Banjo-Kazooie and transfer them into Banjo-Tooie via the N64 stored memory, but it was cut due to hardware limitations. You can, however, still see the mysterious items in both games, in particular the infamous ice key. Now, stop and swap could be an entire video on its own, but all you need to know is that the sequel was explicitly planned. Firstly, the story starts with Grunty being rescued by her two sisters after falling off the tower during the final boss fight from the first game, and on a mission to regain her life force and reach full power by zapping the life force from others in the world. Your mission this time is to save the residents of Isla Hags, which acts as the new hub world, and stop the uprising of Grunty. The first big thing the game does right away is it synergizes the experience for old and new players. Spiral Mountain acts as a playground to relearn all the old moves from the original game, but you can skip right through it if you feel comfortable and ready to go. Grunty's lair is accessible, but only home to Cheeto, who, similar to the first game, will grant you hidden cheats. There are some other secrets in Spiral Mountain, but you can instantly head over to Isla Hags after a short boss fight with Klungo, Grunty's minion. The world opens up, and you are able to discover that outside of your humble home in Spiral Mountain is a vast and sprawling land filled with new worlds to explore, characters to meet, and foes to fight. Jinjo Village helps give real life and a sense of community in the game, even when all the Jinjos are missing and need to be rescued. Now let's get into the big differences. Firstly, the moves. Jam Jars takes the lead in teaching you advanced moves, and the best way we can break down these moves is into 3 categories. We have moves that improve the flow of gameplay, moves that add new features in the Banjo-Kazooie skill set, or the most interesting being the split pad solo moves. For improving the flow of gameplay, we get a couple moves like Grip Grab and the airborne egg attacks. From the previous game, there were sometimes moments where ledges were just too high, or sometimes during a flying sequence, your only attack being the Big Bomb dive was just too risky. These moves added improvements to help adjust the flow of gameplay to give players more freedom. Even the forward roll, which isn't a new move, has been improved as Banjo continually rolls forward without stopping, whereas in the first game he would stop upon completing the roll for a brief moment, meaning after attempting a roll, if you missed the enemy, you were a sitting duck. Even swimming has been improved, with Banjo and Kazooie being able to combine to swim significantly faster, which is especially key in the game's water world, Jolly Roger's Lagoon. The second category, which I would classify as new features, include moves such as the spring shoes and climbing boots, which each have their own specific applications in niche and catered puzzles. Finally, we have the split pad solo moves. In Witchy World, the third world in the game, the player learns how to split up Banjo and Kazooie and take control of each character individually. This is a fantastic gameplay feature as there are a ton of new moves to learn for each individual character, and specific circumstances where perhaps you only need one of either Banjo or Kazooie, such as the Hoop Challenge in Witchy World's Bouncy Castle. After playing through the entire game as a duo, being given the chance to split them up is a completely new dynamic and keeps the game fresh whilst adding another dimension to a perfect gameplay formula. Even eggs get an improvement, as instead of simply having one egg, now you have additional fire eggs, grenade eggs, ice eggs, and clockwork Kazooie eggs. Each egg can be used in combat but also has their own applications in specific puzzles. On that note, let's talk about collectibles, because Banjo-Tooie changes that up as well, and I'd argue for the better. The only thing that has been largely unaltered is Jiggies. Jiggies are still key for driving the game forward and opening up access to new worlds. Everything else though has had minor tweaks. Notes are directly related to learning new moves, as Jam Jars will not only teach you new moves once you have found his hidden locations, but also have the required amount of notes. Jinjos have also been mixed up. Previously, you had to collect the 5 hidden Jinjos, one of each color in each world, to earn a Jiggy. Now, however, Jinjos no longer reward a Jiggy for the world. In Isla Hags, you can find Jinjo houses for each color Jinjo, and the Jiggy in Isla Hags is rewarded when you recover the entire family for that color Jinjo. For example, there is only one member in the white Jinjo family, so if at any point you find the white Jinjo, it's a free Jiggy. However, the black Jinjo family has 9 members, so you have to find all 9 members to get that Jiggy. By the way, in each world, the colors of each Jinjo you find are random, so depending on which color you get, you might not complete some of the families until really late in the game. Another great thing about the pickups like eggs, feathers, and notes is that instead of picking them up as one individual item, they are now in a bundle. So for the most part, one egg pickup is worth 10 eggs. This is a great change, as with the multiple different egg types in the game, you won't find yourself running low on eggs, as the game provides plenty of opportunities to stock up with drops that not only respawn, but periodically cycle through each egg, so you can pick it up when it's the right egg you want. Enemies also respawn in this game, so combat is going to be more difficult. You can't just kill everything and cruise through the worlds like you could in Banjo-Kazooie. There is always a sense of risk and danger, and that means there are far more combat sections in this game, which help vary up the exploration. It should also be mentioned, however, that dying in this game has far less consequence than Banjo-Kazooie, as you are not required to spend time collecting all 100 notes in each world again. Boss fights are doubled down now with their own cutscenes, great writing, and more dynamic fights. Mumbo Jumbo now acts as a playable character who can cast spells that can alter the world in dynamic ways, providing power to the rides in Witchy World or allowing you to breathe underwater in Jolly Roger's Lagoon. There are still transformations though, except this is through another character called Humpa Wumpa and requires Globos. Banjo-Tooie even includes far more minigames. Kickball, dodgems, germ shootouts, every world has a variety of minigames to keep the gameplay fresh, and honestly, some of these minigames can stand well on its own 2 feet. It should be worth mentioning that Banjo-Tooie also includes split-screen multiplayer, so you can play some of these minigames with your mates directly from the menu screen. There are even deathmatch modes that mimic GoldenEye in first person. You can also replay boss battles from the main menu as well. So you've heard me go on about how amazing these things are, but why is it that Banjo-Tooie doesn't hold the same status as Banjo-Kazooie? Ultimately, it comes down to the worlds. You see, in Banjo-Kazooie, each world stood on its own, and there was virtually no interaction between them. Each world acted as a separate experience, but in Banjo-Tooie, right from the first world, there are tunnels and passages that connect the worlds to each other. In some worlds, there are even train stations allowing you to take cargo and travel between other worlds. Some players did not appreciate this change because they enjoyed being able to spend a solid 30 minutes understanding and exploring everything there is to know and find out about a world, and then move on. The worlds in Banjo-Tooie are far more ambitious, where it is possible to spend easily an hour and a half in each world, or in one particular case, 3 hours in Grunty Industries. But because of all these connections between the worlds, there is a lot of backtracking, and ultimately this is what slows the game right down and ruins the replayability for a lot of players. Banjo-Kazooie only had one instance of backtracking, and it was in the 5th world, Freeze Easy Peak. In order to complete the sled race, you need the turbo trainers, which are learned in the 6th world, Gobi's Valley. You can't be clever and do the 6th world first either, because you need the Beak Bomb attack in Gobi's Valley to open up one of the pyramids, which is learned in Freeze Easy Peak. Other than this minor instance, there is no backtracking whatsoever, and you can 100% the game in a linear fashion. Banjo-Tooie does not allow you to do this, and almost every world, with the exception of the 8th and final world, Cloud Cuckoo Land, has some element of backtracking. There are even some jiggies where you need to go through multiple worlds to complete some specific tasks. Scrotty's kids require trips to and from several worlds, and fixing the pool in Jolly Roger's Lagoon requires you not only to access Grunty Industries via the pipes, but you also need to push George the Ice Cube off the edge in Cloud Cuckoo Land and then open the doors to the water pool he cooled down in Hailfire Peaks. Even to do some basic tasks, like accessing the main building for the first time in Grunty Industries, requires the player to find the switch that opens the train station, leave the world, get on Chuffy the train, and then re-enter Grunty Industries via a train station. This can seem a little much, and It is for this reason why I can understand why Banjo-Tooie can sometimes get cast aside a little. With all that in mind though, I think we should reflect on how this game would have been experienced upon release. Players who replay the game now might be well aware of the tasks ahead, and there are certain high points and low points for sure. I mentioned Grunty Industries, which most of the Banjo-Tooie community agree is a pretty slow slog, as well as the Canary Mary races in Cloud Cuckoo Land, which are so off the charts difficult to do legit, players have had to resort to either using a spoon to assist button mashing, or pause buffering the game to make sure you don't miss any frame inputs. Aside from a couple slow bits, the reality is you don't have to accomplish everything in order to beat the game. In fact, you can skip large parts of the later worlds entirely and go on to the final boss fight, which, just like the last game, utilizes new moves and skills with several combat stages. There is even a twist on the quiz show format, and just like in Banjo-Kazooie, players are able to recall most parts of the game due to each world dripping with personality. If this is your first time playing Banjo-Tooie, the truth is you don't need to find every single secret and do all of the backtracking. But having the worlds intertwine with each other creates a more open world experience, and some of the incentives with powerful cheats to prevent fall damage or give health regeneration are only earned and given out to the dedicated players that can explore and unlock those puzzles. There is even a secret transformation where Kazooie can turn into a dragon, but players completely miss this. It is really common that you'll come across elements in worlds as early as Spiral Mountain, where the player will not be able to obtain specific items or secrets. But Banjo-Tooie rewards that player who can piece together the puzzle and upon learning a new move go, oh, I remember there was a rock in Glitter Gulch Mine that I couldn't get past before. I wonder what's behind it. Yes, if you are replaying the game, it can turn into a chore at times, but in my honest opinion, I really do believe that the biggest vice in Banjo-Tooie, the thing that everyone complains about, actually turns out to be the game's biggest strength. Banjo-Tooie is a more ambitious title that acts as a role model for how a perfect sequel should be executed. Don't force the player to have to relearn things they learned from the previous game. Maintain a strong gameplay formula, but add in more dynamic ways for players to interact with the characters they love. And finally, challenge the player with more fearsome foes, technical puzzles, and ambitious worlds. But don't cut out features from the base game just for the sake of making that sequel. Sure, there are some things that Banjo-Tooie could have done better, but I cannot fault Rare for trying. And with so much more to explore, there are bound to be a few really standout worlds for everyone who plays this game. Rare ultimately did a phenomenal job in creating an epic gameplay formula with witty characters and awesome worlds. I'm fully aware that I've omitted talking about the third game in the franchise, Nuts and Bolts, but the gameplay formula in that particular title is very, very different, and I kind of consider it as more of a spin-off rather than a direct sequel. If you have never played Banjo-Kazooie or Banjo-Tooie, I highly recommend checking it out, as it's quite a lot of fun and it's aged pretty well. You can even pick up remastered versions in the Xbox Digital Store. Like I said, these two classic games will not only hit that nostalgia feel, but even raise your expectations for what you should demand from the next modern day adventure game you play. Thanks for watching. I really love all the support I've gotten so far. We have hit over 150 subs and I'm seeing more and more people enjoy the reviews. So stay tuned, there are more reviews coming along the way, but if you like more of this style content, please let me know in the comments. I might also post a quick tier list of the Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie worlds depending on how well this video is received. Please remember to like and share if you enjoyed this video, leave a comment because I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback, and consider subscribing for more content and game reviews. Once again, thanks for watching, Lancy out.